is what we're going to be talking about right now. Is we're going to be talking about a upcoming auction in Virginia, or past auctions in Virginia. So we're going to be looking at a couple of different sales that took place from 2025 to 2026. And, you know, Virginia, we'll talk about here in a second, is how Virginia works.
Now, Virginia is a tax deed state, so essentially meaning that that they wait out a redemption period before the county will begin the foreclosure process on the properties. They're going to have properties open up for what's owed in taxes and fees, and they use premium bidding to to sell a property. So highest bidder wins. Everything is pretty straightforward for most everything that works in Virginia. There are some counties that may have a minimum bid that's higher or require a percentage of the assessed value. We've seen that in some cases here. But what we also find, though, is that some of the counties provide current photos, at least more so for, I mean, of course, exterior. We're not getting interior photos of properties, but they do provide us with newer exterior images of properties, which can also be really handy, just because we can see the information there rather than needing to rely on online information, and we know that it is that it's current. But the other thing about Virginia is they have a lot of sales. They're smaller sales, but there are larger numbers of them, and they happen on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, exactly. Now, they also provide photos on most of the pieces of the land as well. So that really gives us an advantage, especially if we can't get a street view. We can see what the land looks like from where the photo was taken. And so that's one of the big advantages of Virginia. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go look at a number of different auctions that took place over about the last 3 or 4 months or so, 5 months, I guess I would say. And we're going to be looking at some commercial property. We're going to be looking at some homes, and we're going to be looking at some land that have sold recently. And we're going to start with this property right here. Now, to be 100% honest with you guys, I don't know a whole lot about mobile home parks. I've been kind of interested in them, but this is one that ended up selling at the tax sale. We can see that it sold for $460,000, but it's also got a pretty good sized piece of land with it.
Yeah, in fact, what's interesting about these properties is the income potential that like a little trailer park like this has. I mean, it's part of the reason why trailer parks have always been fascinating to us, and they do come up occasionally, sometimes in tax sales. But what you essentially have, I mean, with a trailer park and a lot of units there, you have the potential to create pretty amazing income, potential there with a lot of properties, and without the same kind of costs that would need to go into it in order to have homes, renting out anywhere else or any other way.
Yeah, well, and I counted, about 60 lots there, between 50 to 60 lots, and it's also 38 acres. So as we look here at the map, and it's going to include all this land there, and across the street that's Walmart. So we're in really a prime location. They're not utilizing all of the lots, and they have all this extra land. In fact, if we look at this here, this can kind of give us an idea of the land itself. In fact, I think there's also this map here, which I think may give us an additional view as well. But
it's a big enough property though, with where it's located at as well. Oh, that's interesting. Where does it? Oh, it is. Oh, it doesn't have access up to the front road. It has access to that road. That's interesting.
Yeah. There's access on this road, and then there's access on this road here. So you've got these two different access points, but you can see that the trailer park itself is only all of this and all of this over here, but you have all of this land over here as well. So, we're talking at almost 40 acres. Here's Walmart. Here's all kinds of different, commercial buildings. You've also got trailer parks down here, but it's already been zoned for this. So you could really class this up if you wanted to, and provide places for people to have income type property. I mean, maybe you could even get the permits to subdivide it and sell the land individually to people that are bringing on trailers. I mean, there's just so much possibility with something like this. Yeah, they paid a lot for it. They paid $460,000, but the income potential, the land value, And we'll look at a couple things here in a second to kind of go over some of that. So, here's the Google Street View. Here's kind of where we're looking at the Google Street View of some of it.
These are October of 2024, so a couple years old, but not too bad.
Yeah, this is kind of where it comes up around here. And then over around here, I believe is, this area right here.
What are the numbers on this? I don't think I saw the numbers.
How much it sold for?
Or yeah, or even the value, or yeah, anything. I didn't see.
The value of the county was 700. It sold for 430, and that's really, or 790 was the county value, I think. So I have to look again, something like that. And so I was trying to determine, what the value of it was. Did they get a good deal or not? And really, where I think that they did is because of the additional land value. So, here's one that's that's selling for 800,000. It's a 23 unit. It's not located in the same area, and this is where I don't know a ton about mobile home parks. I was trying to figure it out, but they rent out for about $415 a month, and this is a 23 unit. I can't remember the acreage on this. I think it's like 7 acres. This one just got listed on the market with 41 pads, at 2.15.
So for picking it up for, you say they got it for 200,000 or 300,000?
They got it for 460,000. I think it's worth $1 million, as is, because, also if we look at some of the land value within the area, this is 2 acres, pretty close to where this is, and they're trying to get 1.5 million. And I saw lots in here and building lots in this commercial area that was selling for quite a bit. So, I think easily could be worth $1 million, maybe more than that. And I think the potential on it could be a lot greater than that, in being creative, figuring out what you could do with it, add additional units. Maybe you could put, some type of apartments or some sixplexes or something on there. I don't know, but the fact that it's already zoned for that, and it's already got about 50 to 60 pads that you could get utilized, I think that could bring in some pretty good income.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting property because you could monetize it right now just how it is, but it does look like there's real potential there if you wanted to, to maybe subdivide the property or do further development on it, because the values are high enough that certainly with 50, so many acres there to work with, it does seem like the value would be pretty high on a property like that.
Here's another one, and this is just a home, and I was just kind of go through quickly before we get going and try to find some that we could look at. Here it ended up selling for 74,000. They don't have a ton of information on it. We can just see kind of that photo there. Has an assessed value of 126, and so, well, let's look into the market value. And so
yeah, it seems like a pretty good, I mean, it's so clean that for 75,000 in Virginia, that seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, well, you can see it's, it's a split level. I'm sure it can be cleaned up, but I would imagine probably built in the late 70s or 80s, maybe a little bit newer. Not too bad of an area. I mean, it's nothing blaring here, and it's really kind of, it's not a bad looking split level either with the brick, the gray. You could replace some things on it. Here's what, Redfin is valuing it, and I found some properties in the area that are selling that were similar, between 175 to about 225. They were kind of the same split level, just that were about the same size. It just depend how nice they'd been rehabbed or fixed up or not.
Yeah, so at 75,000, realistically, they probably did pretty well on it. At least, they didn't pay 50% quite for it. They're probably closer to about 40%, and it's new enough that those numbers aren't too bad, and they can make 100,000 on it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I think. They paid 74,000. Let's say that they put 30,000 into it, and it's really nice. They could sell it for 200. Well, at that rate, you're making 80 to $100,000 on it, and that's a pretty good return on doing a property that's only valued at around 200,000.
Yeah, I mean, 75,000 for a property like that is it's a pretty good deal. I mean, they overpaid. They paid more for this one right here, at 91 than they did for the other one. This one's probably a lot older.
Yeah, it is quite a bit older. We can look at some of the information here. See that they have a value of 186.
Oh, but that's a big lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
22-acre lot.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the value resides, and you can see that there's a bunch of smaller lots around it too. So we're looking at a pretty good sized lot here, pretty good piece of land.
Yeah, well, and I'll bet if it's the same county that we're dealing with, land values are pretty high, and so once again, 22 acres could have substantial value there. Some of it's been cleared too.
Yeah, some of it's currently being used as farmland. So that this is already bringing in some type of residual income. Somebody's farming that land. At least I think it looks like with everything going on there, definitely that piece was being farmed. But yeah, it has some pretty good value to it. If we look at kind of the value, here's where the home is located, and you can kind of see that it goes all back there.
Oh, that home actually looks better than it did in the county images there.
Yeah, well, you can see that they've got a new roof. At least it's all brick. It's a little bit older home, but it's not too bad. And then you've got all of this land. Yeah, see, you can see that that's being.
Yeah, they're growing hay there, I think.
Yeah, but somebody that's looking for a more rural property, this was picked up for 91,000. Zillow is valuing it around 251, and I think it could be more valuable than that. When I was looking at some of the land that was selling in the area, there was land that was selling that were similar size for $150,000, and so is this worth 300 more than that? It very well could be. It takes some more research to kind of getting into it. I'm just quickly looking at a few comps as I'm going through these. But
at 91 though, they did pretty well, just like the previous case here, where they didn't even pay full 50% for it. They probably paid closer to about 40% for it, and that's not even really accounting for all the extra acreage and what that might be worth.
yeah, exactly. Well, and that's kind of where we see most of the properties top out. Occasionally we've seen some go higher than that, but a lot of them will sell about 40 cents on the dollar or less for a lot of these properties. I mean, of course, you're always going to see exceptions to that, but we could show example after example of these different types of properties where you're not getting them for free, but you're getting property there probably cheaper than you could any other means.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you're not going to be able to go in there and look for foreclosures and find a deal like this where it's over 50% off. You won't find that anywhere else really, where they're willing to sell it at a price point like this. Even this one assessed at 158, it's probably kind of like some of the others here where it's valued at closer to 200 or so. And I'll bet the number's fairly similar. They probably paid about 40% for it, maybe 50%.
Yeah, you kind of see they've got that feature there. It's got a terrible noise. I don't know if you heard that when it's doing that video.
Oh, no, we don't hear anything.
I didn't think you did. You guys were lucky because it's hard to listen to. It sounds like they're blowing something in it, but we can see some of the details on it. So you can see that the house, their door's in pretty good shape. Obviously, it can be cleaned up, but it doesn't look too bad overall.
These all came from one sale?
No.
Oh, to
These
go a
are
couple of different sales.
yeah. I was just kind of like the last couple of properties when they're one sale. There's a couple properties, so I just looked at maybe 3 different auctions.
Nice. Well, and that's also, so the Virginia sales, sometimes they only have 5 properties in an auction, or, maybe 10 if it's like a bigger auction. We've seen a few that are slightly bigger than that, but they tend to be pretty small sales with less than 10 properties.
Yeah, well, one thing that I found kind of interesting
Yeah, the
is
next door neighbor.
you can see that they've got this going on. They were going through a full rehab on this property at this time.
Yeah, and that's the next door neighbor.
Yeah, and you can look that a lot of these homes are getting fixed up, cleaned up, and so it makes sense to fix a lot of these homes up. And this is very similar to this one right here. We're always going to look to see what does the roof look like, the exterior, the windows, does the door look secure? Be a little bend there, but that'd be easy to fix.
Yeah, those are pretty good opportunities there. I mean, valued at 232. Yeah, so at 90, 95,000 or whatever, they did pick it up for about that same price, about 40% of value. They did pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can kind of see that's where I think that we've got a lot of investors that are doing it, and so they're not going to go over. In fact, I was trying to find this one that we did. I think we did a deal on the day on it years ago, but we'd looked up, or a year ago, we looked it up and we could see what it sold for at the tax sale, and then it was like 3 or 4 months later, and it was all rehabbed and fixed up, and we could see what the profit margins on it. I could not find it, but it was kind of something similar to this where they picked it up for, in fact, they probably got it for closer to 30 cents on the dollar, and they put maybe 20% of the property's value into fixing it up, so they were probably into it 50%, and we're estimating that they were probably making about $200,000 on it.
Interesting.
But yeah, kind of another example of a decent property picked up there in Virginia. These are just a couple of cheap lots that were picked up, so there is opportunity out there. This one was 0.37 an acre. We've got kind of photos of it there. Sold for 1,250. It's kind of a cabin or kind of a camping type lot, but lots look like they were valued 10 to 15, 20 grand in that area.
Yeah, that's not bad. It's pretty cheap there, $1,200, for a decent lot. That's pretty good.
Yeah, this one here sold for $500. I had to look up at the county section, but it's kind of this lot right here. Oh, that didn't work.
And that's kind of bizarre how they've got that little circle there.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily just that circle. It comes up here like that.
Huh.
I had to look up in the record. Here's another 1.39 acres for 500. So I mean, these aren't the most sexy lots in the world, but that's not a bad 0.39 acre lot for $500.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that lots were selling that cheap in Virginia.
Yeah, well, some of the times they'll do these type of lots as non-judicial sales. Sometimes they do as judicial sales, and it's the process of going through the judicial foreclosure or not. And so, in cases like these type of properties, and I don't know, this one's actually not, I don't think this is a non-judicial sell, but sometimes they'll sell them up starting at like $100 or $500 for those, and they can still be worth bidding on or buying. You're getting 100% ownership, but because there's so little records on it, they don't go through, and because it doesn't have as much value, they're not going to go through the expense of doing a full judicial foreclosure. But this is about a $10,000 to $15,000 lot here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, here's just another type of lot. They paid a little bit more for this one, but they ended up paying just over 10 grand for it. That lot right there And, you know, I was checking, and there's quite a bit of building going on within this area. And here's the actual lot that it pulled up, you know, which I don't know why they're showing that high of value. Oh no, this is the comp. This is the next door comp that sold for 50,000. And then here's one that sold for 46,000 that were, you know, really close to it. So, you know, they paid about 10,500. It's worth about 45 to 50. You've still got a pretty good profit margin. And there was seriously 50 lots like this that I looked at.
Wow.
You
So
know,
yeah, even though they seem to pay a lot, I mean, 10,000 seems like a lot to pay. If it's valued at 50,000, then the margins are there.
yeah. You know, here's another one that's ended up selling for $3 grand. It's about 0.22 acres, just under 10,000 square feet. Look at some of the photos here. And you can see it's right next to a newer home. It's located right there. And then we can go down and get the street view of it. It's that lot right there. And then here are a couple of properties that have sold within that area. This just barely sold for 27,000. Here's another one that sold for 20,000. And so, you know, these are different comps within this area that this was picked up for $3 grand.
That's pretty good though. You know, they probably picked it up for 10 or 15% of value.
Yeah. We'll look at one more, and I have a bunch of others, but this is enough to go through. You know, this one ended up selling for 2,100. It's about 0.36 of an acre. Look at some of the photos. You can see it's kind of a nice big lot back here near the end. And what's kind of interesting about it is, you know, this here is what, you know, Redfin pulls up on it, you know, at 149,000. Now I don't think it's worth that. I think that, you know, Redfin's out of its mind on that. But here are a couple of properties that have sold really close to it. In fact, this one, you know, this is actually one that's for sale, and this one actually might be the one that he picked up right here for 2,100.
Yeah, those are pretty numbers then. That's 5% of value.
Well, you can see from the map, you know, so I don't know if it's saying the 62, but 62, that's the lot. You know, if it's 61, then that's the lot next door. So this may be them reselling it. They picked it up for, you know, $2,100, and they're now relisting it for sale for 40 grand. So either, yeah, see, it is that lot. Let me look again. Both Signal Court. See, that Signal Court, it's either that lot or maybe it's this lot right here next to it. But either way, you've got one, you know, you picked it up for $2,100. You know, here's one that sold for 32 that's very similar. Oh, it's the lot to the left of it. See? The one that's for sale is this lot here on the left, and this is this one right here on the right.
Yeah, so a $40,000 comp is a pretty good comp for it there, with it being the next door property.
Yeah, well, and this one's really close, sold for 32. So, you know, picking it up at that price, they're probably going to do pretty well with it.